Hi everyone, Carter Krishnar here for Beyond the 90. Let's give a quick update on the labor dispute. Those of you who follow me on Twitter or on Blue Sky, I don't tweet very much anymore. I'm not really active on Twitter, but I am active on, well, a little more active on Blue Sky. I'm not terribly active on either, but have already seen an update from me that things are progressing in a way that they were not for the longest time, which explains why there has been action by the players. There have been the player protests, but there has not been an escalation. And I've heard from a lot of you, not just my colleague Jonathan Starling, who's put his views, which he's certainly entitled to, into writing, his opinions about what the players' unwillingness to strike means. But I've heard from an awful lot of you that, okay, the players must be comfortable with the current CBA because they have not walked, and they authorized a strike and they haven't walked. But I have to tell you, from talking both to players and to clubs, not to anyone in HQ, but to clubs specifically, it seems like their actions have worked, right? The demonstrative manner of, at first, not kicking the ball for a minute, then not kicking a ball for 2 minutes, for a minute at the start of either half, and then escalating to forming a circle, a solidarity circle, if you will. That this has impacted the clubs, this has impacted the technical staffs, and they have been pressuring USL HQ, select clubs. Now, there's some clubs that are still hardliners. We've talked about which clubs are in which camp in the past, right? Or we've discussed some of them. I don't want to go back through that, where you can go back and read our previous articles, watch the previous videos if you want to know where your club might be, if you're a fan of the USL Championship fan. I think we've probably talked about the majority of clubs at this point in some context with relationship to this dispute through the course of the last 6 to 8 months in the coverage we've been bringing you at Beyond the 90. But what has happened is there seems to be more of a conversation going on now about the flow of rights in terms of licensing and what that licensing number might look at like. And as you guys know, a couple of weeks ago, I said, I thought that even though there were still gaps that needed to be bridged on things like compensation, right? We call it compensation, not wages, because it includes some other elements. Things like healthcare, things like travel, things like meals. That stuff was, it was kind of here, whereas licensing was here. Well, you can't even come off the screen, right? But and there was no even agreement on the flow of rights. Now, what some clubs tell me is that they, because of the way the players' union was communicating via Instagram and via Twitter, they were of the belief that licensing was not the priority. They thought healthcare or travel or wages, compensation, was the priority. Therefore, they pushed their representative in collective bargaining, which is USL HQ, to improve those numbers and what that looked like to come closer to the player ask on that. And that had they known licensing was this important, they may have addressed it months ago. I don't know if that's true or not, quite frankly, because I think establishing the flow of rights and what licensing looks like is something that I think the Players Association, from my conversations, not just with the executive director, Connor Tobin, but also with my conversations with individual players, I think that's something that the Players Union was on top of as early as September of last year, or October, let's say October. Maybe September is too early. And we're articulating, at least to their clubs, that the licensing was really important to them. And the licensing is not just a number, it's a flow of rights. Now, perhaps because the number was so gaudy, thrown out there by the Players Union initially, 7 figures, the clubs and League HQ balked and said, well, no, that's not, that's not an acceptable number. So we're not going to proceed, and we're going to try and work out these other things instead, and come closer on these other things and force the issue on licensing. Whatever the case, my understanding is the last 2 weeks have been really productive. And so, you're here on licensing, and now you're kind of here. Flow of rights still being established. Okay, maybe you're not here. You're still about here, but you're not here anymore. You're about here, and then you've got flow of rights they're becoming an understanding about that. And also what is entailed in a group licensing agreement, what that gives you. This does not require, let's say it's, take a random, let's say it's El Paso. This does not require El Paso, their marketing director, to get on the phone with the executive director of the union or someone working at the players union to say, hey, can we put such and such a player on a team sheet graphic, on a lineup card graphic for Saturday night's game against New Mexico. That's not that all the fear that I heard from people at clubs that, oh my goodness, this is going to make, we don't have the administrative capability to be contacting the union about every little graphic we put out on social media, every little piece of paraphernalia we may print in match day programs, that sort of stuff. If they do match day programs, many clubs don't. But you get what I'm talking about. Now they've established, okay, it's a little more streamlined than that. There are still things you're going to need permission from the players for. But it's not quite as cumbersome as maybe some of the owners thought. So I think that's being established. So that's a positive. I think the tone in the room, from what I understand, has changed. USL HQ would like to get a deal done. Now, do I think a deal is going to get done in the next 2 or 3 weeks? No, I don't. So that would bump us into the US Open Cup 4th round, where it's a very, very big night for the USL Championship, assuming a couple of these teams advance in the next few days against MLS clubs and they get a second bite at the apple and have an opportunity to go deep in the tournament, which is a big thing for USL, a big thing for the owners, a big thing for the clubs. I think what I'm gathering from the Players Association is they understand the visibility of Open Cup versus the USL regular season. They also understand the challenges of that. They don't want to be responsible for hurting the business of USL, because let me explain this, and we've talked a lot about this in the past about MLS Next Pro, and I had 3 years ago I thought MLS Next Pro was well positioned in terms of the lower division soccer wars. A year ago, 2 years ago, I thought that they were on their last rights. Well, maybe not 2 years ago, I didn't think they were on the last rights. A year ago, I thought they were. Now they're reemerging. But let me state that this reemergence, and this is my personal opinion here, but I do believe it's the opinion shared in USL HQ in Tampa and shared by the majority of USL players. MLS Next Pro taking over the lower division soccer space, if something were to happen to USL in the next few years, if USL were to disappear because of multiple factors, it wouldn't be the labor dispute alone that does that, but multiple things, including USL's inability to deliver on new franchises, to really kind of get this premiere going as quickly as they wanted. And these are some of the reasons Justin Papadakis isn't at the league anymore. Okay, the inability to kind of make investors understand that they have an upside in USL League One or USL Championship that they do not have in Next Pro. So the USL may not be here in seven years. They may not be here in 10 years. That would be a disaster for the sport. Okay, I had just gotten done last week talking about the 15th anniversary of the NASL kicking a ball. I think the NASL disappearing was a disaster for the sport. I think it set us back several years in the lower division space and in the overall player development space and the overall space of professional men's soccer. Now, USL, who were the beneficiaries of the NASL going under in many ways, raised their game. Lower division soccer is in its best state currently, right now, in 2026, than it's ever been. And that's thanks to USL. That has nothing to do with MLS Next Pro. It has nothing to do with Major League Soccer. Nothing. Zero. And the danger, just like I think NASL going away made everything take a step back, I don't think USL was ready in 2018 to really assume that mantle. They've gotten there now. Well, part of it is they have to get the reserve teams out of USL, which they did. That was part of it. So it goes back to the Next Pro issue. If you were to replace USL with MLS Next Pro, you will see player development not be as strong. you will see market development and fan culture not be as strong. You will see labor standards be much weaker. So with this in mind, I think a lot of players realize, okay, we have our bone to pick with Alec Papadakis and Paul McDonough. We do not want the beneficiaries to be Ali Curtis and Don Garber. You know, that's going to hurt the guys we're fighting for, the younger players we're fighting for, that's going to hurt them. And so this is why we're fighting this fight, because we think the USL structure needs to change. We need USL to be stronger. We need USL to survive. We need USL to be all it can be for players, for fans, for technical staff, for front office staff. Because I guarantee you MLS Next Pro is not going to deliver that. So I think we're going to get more into some of these individual fights between MLS Next Pro and USL. Obviously, Jacksonville is the centerpiece of that, but some other places also in the very near future. But understand this. I think that there's a feeling among players that there's a responsibility that they not hurt the product. Okay, USL has been, in spite of what's going on right now, probably a better partner for labor than MLS Next Pro would be. Not probably, they have been. And look, and I think as we go on, you're seeing more and more MLS technical staff say, you know what, MLS Next Pro is crap. Okay, we don't want, if we really think a player might develop into a first team player, we don't want them in Next Pro. And for those investors like Carolina Core, like Grand Rapids, like Connecticut United, that have gone into, I mean, we know why Chattanooga's in Next Pro. That's the fault of USL, by the way. I'm not exempting USL for their responsibility in that issue. But the reality is this. Those independent clubs will never have the ability to sell to their supporters the sort of experience USL Championship and USL League One clubs can at the moment. Okay, that's just a reality. Now, if that's not important to an investor, okay, I get it. But it is important to players and it is important to fans. So ultimately, I think there's a general view right now. Okay, a strike is not off the table. We have voted to authorize a strike, but we're now seeing some progress. All of the, some of you have said to me, it's just performance art. It's just nonsense. Said to me privately. I mean, on WhatsApp and on Blue Sky, I've had a bunch of direct messages about this labor situation and the protests, the player protests. But I think those protests, I'm just trying to give it to you straight here. I mean, I'm my own way kind of frustrated and feel like things maybe are going below the radar that were very much front and center 2 months ago or a month and a half ago. I do freely concede that. But I do think, based on what I'm hearing, these protests are having an effect. And who are they having an effect on? They're having an effect on the clubs. They're not necessarily, HQ is reacting to what the pressure the clubs are putting on them. But I think they're definitely having an effect, and I think things are moving in the right direction. I'm not going to say there won't be a strike, but I think the chances of there being a strike are much, much less than they were 4 weeks ago. I mean, there was, I didn't reflect this in the videos I was making because I've been cautious at times, but I actually had a very good source at one of the clubs, and it's a big club, right? It's a club in the Western Conference. It's a big club. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Tell me that, okay, we're playing that team. This team was in Open Cup. Is an Open Cup. Basically, this tell me we're playing our Open Cup game Tuesday, I think it was. They're walking on Thursday. They're gone, right? It's done. They're going to play the Open Cup game and they're going to walk. Well, that didn't happen. But that's how close we were at that time. We're not anywhere near that now. Now, if progress stalls, then we could be back at that point. But I will also tell you, this is the last thing I'll leave you with. There are now more sit-down sessions a week than we were having in 2 and 3 week periods about a month, 4 to 6 weeks ago. So there's a seriousness now. And that, I think, is a reflection that the club, that the player protests. Again, we were not the audience. How you and I, those of you watching this, unless you work at a club, those of you who are fans or journalists, you or I were not necessarily the audience for that protest. Club executives were, club technical directors were, club managers were. And it seems to have worked to a certain extent. So we will keep you posted in this space.